Hello and welcome to the Overseers. I'm Nightwing and I'm joined by my co-host Pro Elias. Today we're switching things around and covering the Shanghai Dragons. We're gonna go over their tanks, DPS supports, their coaching staff, what we think about how their overall season's gonna go, and yeah, this season is looking quite interesting for Shanghai. What do you think, Pro Elias?
For sure, for sure. Because this team hasn't, I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So, because of that, Shanghai has retained a ton of their players. They've also made some new signings, which uh, I don't know if I agree with all of them, but we are going to discuss that and see if this team can actually form like the championship roster and get to the promised land, which is like that elusive rank one spot on the Overwatch League leaderboard. Yep.
Yep. The thing is that rank one doesn't really count because eventually the playoffs just mess everything up and you have to just win the league. That's what gives you the big bucks.
Fair
But
enough.
yeah, it's definitely something to strive towards. I think last season, who was on top? It was either Philly or Shanghai, right? Like at the very top of the leaderboard.
Yeah,
Who was it?
I mean it might be Shanghai. I just meant like rank one as in just like winning it all that way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes more sense. You want to go into talking about the tanks?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so they've got Fate coming over from Florida, and Fearless just pressing a leave game on Shanghai Dragons. Um, and they've also got Void on off tank, and that's pretty much it. They're all in on this tank line. They don't really have any subs, which is okay because these both of these players are cracked. You want to talk about Fate?
Sure, sure. So I actually disagree. I do not think Fate is cracked. I mean, it might be. I mean, I'm sure it's a hot take at this point because a lot of people are really praising Fate after how well Florida did last year. But I think he was largely successful because of like his top tier teammates, especially Yaki, Gargoyle, and Gang Namjoon. I think those guys were absolutely fantastic, and they sort of inflated how well we thought Fate played last year. His Winston is good as we've seen. His Orisa is also, I would say, serviceable. Um, but I don't think he's one of those like really like players with a high sort of consistency rating or like immense pop off potential on all heroes, right? We know Winston's really good, like I said, but what about Reinhardt and Wrecking Ball? Like, how well is he going to cover those roles? Because even when he was with Florida last year, they preferred playing Karayan over him on Reinhardt for the most part. Later on, they avoided playing Reinhardt as much as possible later on when Fate was brought in. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think he's a little bit inflexible in that regard, and that he's a little bit overrated because of how well his teammates did last year. But one big plus is that he brings a lot of leadership to the team, right? He's known for being really vocal and a sort of guiding light for his teammates. So, in that sense, it's a good pickup because you definitely need a leader on the team, on any team. I think that just gives you an additional boost. Uh, but overall, like speaking of him as an overall main tank player, I could name probably like 5 to 10 better options. That's all I can say. Or better option. I mean, not free agent options, but like just overall 10 better main tank players in the league.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think they wanted to sign Fate because he had some. No, wait, sorry, that was with Fearless who wanted to play with his people at Dallas, right?
Yeah.
So they brought Fate over to Shanghai. Fate, I mean, he did do decently with like Valiant in season one. Season two, Florida was one of the worst teams, if I remember correctly. And they did have Fate in their roster. And then season three, I mean, if you look at Fate's performance, like it goes up and down with his kind of tier of team. considering that he looked quite bad with Florida in season two, and then looked good with the Florida in season three. I mean, it's a bit up and down with him, but he's still a skilled player. I think he did show some good looks, even despite him having good players on his team. He did have some good looks. He was at least not like hard feeling, or I did not feel like the tank position was exceptionally lacking for Florida. At least I think he's at
Mm-hmm.
least league average. I think you could definitely name more uh, outstanding main tanks in the league, but he's consistent. He's not particularly damaging your team by being there,
For
which
sure.
is more than can be said about some other players over the years. So yeah, I think Fate's not bad. I think uh, the fact that he's vocal is something that's very important for a main tank, because that's kind of what decides your pathing, what decides how you play the game, basically. Especially in a meta coming in like double bubble, the monkey has to be super vocal and has to be super like aware about what's happening at the like all the time. And Faith Monkey is quite good. So at least in some of the meta that we might see soon in the league, considering there's only a month left and there's not that many balance changes you can do probably.
Yeah.
So I think at least for the beginning of the season, Fate will not do too badly. Um, that might just be wishful thinking. I think you're right about the ball. It's not his signature hero, definitely, but players are picking up the ball as time goes on. Maybe he'll get a feel for it. He's a consistent player. I think he's open to learning, and obviously he went from a quite a bad team in season two to quite a decent team in season three, and some of that effort has to be his own. So he's probably open to learning and changing up his play style a bit. So yeah, I'm still optimistic about Fate. Uh, we can also go into Void, which is the off tank for the team.
Mm-hmm.
You can go ahead, Julius.
Alright, so overall, I think Void is a really solid player. I don't think anyone will disagree after the kind of monstrous showings he had last year. Generally, people just spoke about how good his Sigma was. But that's mainly just because Sigma was so meta that some of Void's best performances were on that hero. But let's not forget that he plays a really good Diva as well and can flex onto Zarya quite comfortably. So there are very few off tanks in the league that are so versatile, and he's what is just like a really big asset to his team. There's not much to say about him. His reputation precedes him at this point. So yeah, I think you can share your thoughts on him, Nightwing.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about like who's the best like off tank in Overwatch League, you would either, at least after the performances they put up last season, you would either say Choi Hyobin or you would say Void. And then there's a few others you'd put in like Krong or something like that, but Void is definitely up there, and for good reason. He was he kind of pioneered a lot of the positioning I think that Sigmas were using, and the kind of play style that players were using in Overwatch League in season three. I think uh, like holding the high ground on Hanamura, that little bridge where hit scans normally hold. I think Void was like the one often that was constantly doing that right from the beginning, and he's just a superstar. I think on his role. His diva was really good with gladiators as well, even when that team was struggling a bit back when he was on that roster. And at that time, Void was actually severely criticized just because the team was not doing very well. But individually, he's always been a good player, I think, and the results of that are being shown in the kind of performances he showed last season. I think that's going to continue into this season, honestly, because he still has a very good team around him, and he just has to maybe build up a little bit of synergy with Fate, and they're good to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good enough. Should we talk about the damage dealers?
Yeah, I can talk about Erster.
Yeah, sure.
Uh, they what I should mention which DPS they have instead of just naming people out of the blue. They do have they have Chad MVP Fleta, whose skin is going to be coming out very soon. Um, for which you can redeem your alien skin, get 200 tokens back, and spend it on the Fleta skin. Please do that. Thank you. You can. They also have a flex DPS quote unquote star Erster, uh, who used to play for the Atlanta Rain, and they have Lip, who well we'll talk about him as well, and they have Diem, not Hitscan. Those are basically the DPS that Shanghai are working with. I'll get into Erster first, just because I had expectations from Erster last season for Atlanta Rain,
We all
and
did.
they just refused to field the poor guy on anything except May, and that was like after like half a year. And I mean, they did play him a little bit in the beginning on May, when there was like the May McCree Diva Ryan kind of rush comp, right?
Yeah.
But like not a lot of fielding done to Ulster, which is sad because season two, like people were looking at Ulster as an MVP level candidate, but he just dropped off so hard in season three because they were just not fielding him. They just kept putting in like um, Edison and uh, who else was it? Baby Bay for a little bit.
Baby Bay initially and then Sharp in double hit scan.
Yeah, Sharp as well. Sharp is I feel bad for Sharp as well actually, but he's on not on Shanghai, so we won't talk about him. Ulster, yeah, I mean they just I feel bad for Ulster. I think he has a real shot to redeem himself this season and actually get played, even though there are four DPS on the roster, and that they have Fleta, who is very like mega flexible. But hopefully, the coaching staff will have some mercy on him and let him play because he has tons of potential. I think maybe not as much as Fleta, but he's really good. I think he deserves another shot. If players that suffer as badly in the league as Fearless can get a shot at redemption, Erster, who had slightly below average performance and just not that much playtime, definitely deserved redemption considering his play in season two. That's what I think. What do you think?
Um, Definitely a bit hard to judge how good Erster is at this point because of, like you said, his lack of playtime last season. So overall, I think because of that, his stonks have gone down in everyone's minds just because he's been like out of sight, out of mind. Uh, a little bit of a question mark for me as well, to be honest. But there's just, I mean, there's even the flex DPS market at this point is super stacked. So I really don't know how Erster will compare because there are multiple reasons, right? First of all, Erster was in season two. We all saw him as an impressive tracer player, despite him like being a flex DPS. Uh, Last year they fielded Edison on tracer for the most part over Erster, which does like obviously Edison is a really good tracer, but there are like if Erster's been in a situation where somebody else has been fielded for Tracer over him, um, I don't think he's going to be fielded on Tracer for this team either because Fleta has just managed to pick up that hero, and Diem is also pretty good on Tracer from what I've seen. So uh, I don't know if Erster is going to play that role. If you talk about DPS like Farah, Genji, Fleta plays those heroes. If you talk about May, Fleta plays May. So I don't know in terms of value how much he's actually bringing to the table. Um, just individual skill left alone at this point. But with the kind of flexibility this roster has with just Fleta, Lip, and Diem, I don't see his pickup like come at a very high value. That's all I really have to say about him. Maybe he plays Doomfist. Like that's probably all that he'll play for this team. Or maybe he'll be brought in for flex DPS if Fleta's unable to play. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, I think that's a realistic way of looking at it, but I just really like Erster, and I want him to play.
Oh, yeah,
That's
he was so fun to watch in season two.
yeah. I mean, Atlanta as a whole was just fun to watch during that time,
Mhm.
but yeah, he fell off in season three. But yeah, he Fleta is just too flexible. We can talk about him now, but like, of course, he'll bench Erster for most of it, unless like scrims prove otherwise and on particular heroes. But yeah, I mean, he's literally the MVP of last season. Fleta can play anything under the sun pretty much, and if he can't, then the rest of the roster has got it covered.
Mhm.
Fleta has just been impressing us ever since he was playing with Soul, and you felt he was trapped with this sandbagging set of characters with Soul. And now that he's been put on a good roster, he's just popping. He's just doing extremely well. And yeah, I mean, it's hard to find faults with Fleta. Honestly, that I don't have much to say about him. He's just good at the video game.
Mhm.
Yeah, what do you think?
Um, so I feel like I don't know if this is a hot take, but I think Fleta's like MVP status wouldn't have been here if he were, let's say, still on the Soul Dynasty. I think sorry, excuse me. I think the team's structure overall, like the the sort of framework Moon built with this team, enabled him to get that kind of space, get those kinds of resources. Although Fleta isn't a resource-heavy player, uh, it's the structure that really enabled him to do as well as he did last year. I think he still was probably worthy of the MVP award because of how bloody consistent he was and how flexible he was. He genuinely impressed me last year because of that. And well, we all remember how he hit headshot after headshot after headshot. So there's like no two ways about it. Obviously, he's a really great player. I think if you pluck him out of the Dragons one day randomly and put him on another team, he's not going to do half as well, is what I feel. Because right now he's slotted in extremely nicely into this team structure. But yeah, I mean that's I mean I'm actually not really talking about him when I'm mentioning this point, because individually he is skilled and is really flexible. But it's just a point I thought I would bring up because there are some players whom I've mentioned even before are that good because their team enables them to be that good. And I think Fleta is just one of them. He's already great, and his team has brought him up to that god status, which I think all of us knew he could reach at some point or the other. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Fleta.
Yeah, I think that's a fair thought, but also, I mean, if you talk about him not getting a MVP if he was in a worse team, I mean, that's how MVP kind of works. NYXL dominated the entire season in season one. That's why Jonak got the season one MVP. Shock dominated the entirety of season two. I mean, they had a rivalry with Vancouver Titans, but apart from that, that's kind of why Sinatra got MVP in season two, and then Flatter did really well with Shanghai, so he's getting MVP in season three. So it is generally the winning teams that the dominating teams that have the MVP player. Um, but I think it's fair to say that yeah, if he was on a different team, then he would struggle more than he has on a good roster. But that's how Overwatch works. You do worse on a worse team. Um, I think his flexibility is probably what sets him apart because like if you looked at his tracer play, it is very good, but like
Mhm.
it's not better than like Striker. And I think even like Shax could contest him on a good day, and Shax could probably beat him on a good day. And
Yeah, I think Shax is a better tracer. Like Fleta,
yeah, it's just
yeah, he's not like a natural tracer. He just adapted to be a really good tracer, I feel.
yeah, he's very adaptable and very open to learning all the new heroes. He's one of the better echoes in the league as well, and That's just because he's just very flexible, and he puts in the hours, grinds out the hero, understands how the interactions work, and that's what makes him a good player. Uh, but basically, we just keep bouncing off of each other and saying he's a good player. So we can go ahead and talk about Lip, who is also a good player, but he plays different heroes. So you can go ahead about that, Julius.
All right, so yeah, I mean, let's talk about the Hisu of the Shanghai Dragons. Lip has been on this lineup since the beginning of the previous season. He's probably shown us the best Sombra in the league. And even when he pulled out his hit scan, his like McCree, Widow, Ash, I think they were super competent. He was really talented, and I don't think he gets enough credit at this point. Everyone just thinks of Fleta when they talk about the Dragons, but I think Lip also put up some MVP worthy performances last year. I'm not sure if he was one of the nominees for MVP, but I think he can be in contention this year for sure. Uh, Even though they've got like Diem on this roster, I don't think they lose out on anything if they put Lip in. Obviously, DM is just like a specialist at this point, but if you want someone on a single map that can play both Sombra and a hit scan, then Lip's probably one of the best players in the league to do that. So I'm just really high on him, and yeah, I mean, just great to have Shanghai retaining him on the lineup this year. It works really well with Fleta as well, so yeah, major bonus there.
I
Yeah, that's
think
all.
I want to address Lip and DM in the same match, just because I felt a little bit bad for DM during that. Was it the May Melee where Seoul made it to the finals along with Shanghai? And then every match where I think Lip would play, and
Uh,
every map that Lip would play, they would win. And every
yeah,
map that something they would lose. And Chad was just spamming DM is trash.
that's
DM,
sad, dude.
really, if you look at his mechanical skill, he's actually insane. Um, if you looked at the Widow 1v1 they did for the All Stars games as well, DM is really good. I think it's just that Lip sometimes works better with the team with his particular play style. And definitely Sombra is elite. I think in contention with Hisu to be the best in the league, but I think Lip edges that one out, honestly. But yeah, like I said in the Toronto episode, Lip and Hisu are just at that S tier of Sombra play. Lip's McCree looked really, really good. I think his Widow and Ash, probably I would still like to see DM play, uh, but that's just my own opinion. I think his McCree play is probably better than DM's, but his Ash and Widow, I think DM is just mechanically skilled more to like just hit headshots after headshots. Um, but yeah, Lip's a good player. DM's underrated, I think, just because uh, Lip like was more relevant to Shanghai last season. But I think in any hit scan meta, DM can show up with his socks rolled up to his knees and just kick butt.
Yeah, yeah, fair assessment. And speaking of DM from my side, I do think he is a super solid hit scan player. If you've seen his mechanics, if you've spec'd him even in the replay viewer, you know how good his raw mechanics are. It's just that he loses out on that starting spot for the Dragons because Lip is more versatile. I think if you put in DM and just expect like some hit scan play, right, with Ash or Widow, if you've got, let's say, a dive comp on the enemy team and then you need to switch things up, DM's not going to be able to come in and play that counter dive with Sombra, right? Uh, so that's where I think he loses out on the starting spot, and probably also because Lip just has better synergy with Fleta overall, and they have complementary hero pools. So but that's about it. I mean, if you can feel DM, if there's like a double sniper meta, just put DM in and claim your free wins. Essentially, those are my thoughts on him.
Yeah, I think that's quite fair. As a hit scan player myself, I know the importance of needing to switch when you're getting like if you don't have space as a Widow or an Ash, then it's kind of hard, especially as Widow, because then you can just get rolled. You keep shooting Orisa Shield and Sigma Shield the entire day, and nothing really happens. Whereas if you're a more flexible player like Lip, you can move over to the counter dive, like you said, and actually get something done instead of shooting shields all day. Um,
But
Obviously,
it's
that's a
fun
big
shooting
problem.
shields.
Yeah, Overwatch is a shield shooter.
Barrier watch.
It's not really a first person shooter. It's an FSS, not an FPS. But that's what the game is. That's okay. We can stop stalling and move on to the supports now. Um, and we have the Lucio God slash slight feeder, but it works out well for him. LeeJaeGon. We have Molly coming in from Chengdu, I believe,
Yeah.
and then we have um, IZaYaKI, who was uh, quite a good flex support last year. Which one do you want to talk about first, Prolius?
No, I think let's just talk about LeeJaeGon really quick. I don't think either of us will have much to say about him. I feel like he's one of the best main supports in the league. You're right that there have been occasions where he has fed in, like when he's been greedy to make plays. But overall, I think he is a smart player. He's great at managing resources and cooldowns, and he's excellent at all the main support heroes. Like, how many main supports can you actually name who play an elite level Lucio, elite level Brig, and elite level Mercy? I think you could probably count them on your fingers on one hand.
I
So,
can count them on one finger. It's just Moth Overwatch, I think. LeeJaeGon is just angry Moth.
yeah, so LeeJaeGon, yeah, essentially just a god tier main support. Thanks for coming to my TED talk about LeeJaeGon.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have to say. I think we can move on to uh, IZaYaKI, the other remaining uh, flex support, and then later we can move on to Molly. So for IZaYaKI, I think he was uh, he was quite good, but I think he was a little bit underrated because I think in the beginning of the season he wasn't quite there compared to some of the other flex supports. But I think as the season went, you saw his skill level really matching those other flex supports. Uh, I think there's like flex supports like Violet, Alarm, Twilight, and then IZaYaKI is very slightly under those sorts of players, in my opinion. He has great mechanics, good Zen, good Ana. I just I like that he's staying with the team. He's a very skilled player, in my opinion. What do you think?
So I have a slightly different opinion. I actually feel Izayaki is a little bit overrated. Uh, I am a big fan of his Zen play. I've been high on his Zen since the 2019 season when he was with the Valiant. The point you're making about him being not quite good at the beginning of season 3 but looking better later on, which is pretty accurate by the way. But I think that was because Shanghai as a whole just kept getting better and better as the season progressed. Initially, they had Stand One on main tank, who wasn't netting them like as many wins as Fearless would later on in the season. And I think once they cemented the fact that yeah, Fearless was their main tank, things just sort of stabilized for this team, and they started looking good in like every single meta essentially. I mean, they were a little bit inconsistent in the beginning, and that's why they actually like lost to teams like Chengdu. Um, but I think Izayaki looked better than like he probably actually is because of the kind of space that his tanks and DPS got for him, and obviously the insane level of peel that Void provides as an off tank. But mechanical skill, yeah, I mean, in terms of mechanical skill, I don't think there are many flex supports who are better than Izayaki. But like with people saying he's one of the best flex supports in the league, I just have to disagree with that statement. But yeah, those are my essential thoughts on Izayaki.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Um, it's just that he did well with the team. It seems to work well within the system,
Yeah,
and he's not quite up there with like Alarm, Violet, Twilight, but he's quite good, I think.
yeah, he's
And
good. He's good.
yeah, Then we can move over to Molly, from coming in from Chengdu. He's the only Chinese player on the roster, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So you want to talk about him, Prolis?
Yeah, sure. And Molly is actually another player I think is a little bit overrated. uh, he was definitely one of the best players on Chengdu, just because of how messed up that team has been so far. But it's going to be like I'd made that point about Myeonbong, if you remember. If there's like just bad or weak players on your team and you're the one making the most plays, it's easy for you to look like a higher tier of a player. So I think that was one of the situations with Molly where people got really high on him because he was one of the few players making plays constantly for Chengdu. But like we've got to remember that Shanghai is a team of a much higher caliber, and it's going to be hard for him to stand out in this environment because there are many more cracked players over here that he's going to play with. Like you said, he's the only Chinese player on the team. Might have communication issues, although I don't remember who said this, but I remember someone saying Molly's not having a lot of trouble learning Korean and speaking in Korean. I don't remember where I heard that, but I've heard it for sure. Um, but overall, I think he's a low value pickup since IZaYaKi's actually been integrated so well with this team, and IZaYaKi doesn't have any issues on any of the flex supports, right? So, yeah, I mean, IZaYaKi works really well in this team structure, even though I say that he's a little bit overrated. If it works, it just works, and then you don't really need to switch things up by putting in Molly. Um, I think it's still a good addition in case they have to play Babsen. But other than that, I see this as a pretty low value pickup and probably just for marketing purposes, right? Because you need like a Chinese player on a Chinese team. That's all I have to say about him.
Yeah, I think you pretty much are spot on. He's not quite up there with Izayaki, and he did maybe get a little bit of a boost just by being on weird Chengdu, um, but being kind of consistent compared to a lot of the other players on that team. I think one HP was quite high on Molly
Oh yeah.
when he really missed Molly for one of our episodes, I believe. And I mean, he's a good player, but I would probably put in Izayaki for most of the times, like instead of Molly. But yeah, he's there to bolster the flex support and just to make the fans happy, which is fine, which is understandable. Um, I think it's not a bad pickup, honestly. Like, who would you really pick up instead of Molly? There are a few names that come to mind, but like Molly's not a terrible choice, I think.
Hmm.
Like for Shanghai. So yeah, are Shanghai going to be playing out of Korea or China this season? I don't remember
Oh, I don't know that one either, but
because I remember that the league was there was discussing like doing live events in China soon because the pandemic is not quite as harsh there now or something like that. So I'm not sure, but maybe they picked up a Chinese player just because it's easier to access him and there's no visa issues in China. But that's something I'll have to really look that up. And I haven't done my due diligence on that one, to be perfectly honest. But yeah, I think we've covered everyone. We can talk about their org. Their head coach is Moon, and yeah, do you want to talk about the Moon? Mm.
yeah, sure. So just based on last year, right? The I'm super impressed with Moon. He's actually created a really solid framework for the Dragons, unlike anything we've seen for this team before. Which is, I mean, it's not a super high standard, but he still brought this team up to championship contention. Uh, and because of that, I really feel like he's one of the best coaches in the league at this point. He assembled a formidable roster, led them to success, and actually he's got Fate and IZaYaKI with him from his time with the Valiant. Um, might have something special planned for them. Like I said, I'm not too high on Fate, and IZaYaKI is just like a little bit overrated for me as well. But if you've united them with Coach Moon, who actually got some really good value out of IZaYaKI during the GOATS meta, um, he is someone who can win the Dragons a championship this year. Uh, I think as long as he doesn't make his main tank play main support because main support is too smart, this team's going to be fine. But yeah, essentially, Coach Moon, good stuff, man. You've been doing really well. I hope he keeps it up, and maybe the Shanghai Dragons get to see their team take home the trophy this year.
I think Coach Mo is definitely one of the best coaches in the league. Because he when he comes into a team, they really do kind of upgrade. He did well with the Valiant, not quite like complete top tier, but it was a decent performance from the Valiant in season one. Then when he came into Team CC, which was around a fifth to eighth placer contenders team, he pushed them up to like second place during his brief stint with them. And then after that, he comes into Shanghai, gives Fearless a redemption arc, makes an amazing team out of the team that was doing quite terribly in season one and slightly above average, if I remember correctly, in season two. Um, so yeah, Coach Moon, good stuff, like you said. And with that, we're kind of done with all the people. What do you think the overall, like, what are your like overall thoughts on what Shanghai are gonna look like this year?
Uh, okay, so let me just sum up what I think of all of the roles overall. Um, I think with Fate and Void on the tank line, it mainly depends on how good Fate is. If he does well, then I think the Dragons do exceptionally well. If he does poorly, then they probably league average. Um, Void is great, like I said before. The DPS line is really good. They cover a lot of different bases, and they are essentially meta proof. Support line really high on LeeJaeGon. IZaYaKI is good, integrated well with the roster. Molly is just there for, I guess, marketing and Babzen. So support's in a decent spot. So I think if Fate is integrated well into this roster, essentially, they can definitely go for championship contention. Although I would have liked Fearless to be retained, it wasn't really up to the org to do that. Um, so really uncertain at this point, but I don't see them going anywhere probably below top 10 at any point. Even if it's like a meta that on which like Fate has to play ball or something. I think they'll still be fine. They'll still be competitive in most metas, but naturally depends on how the game balances at different points during the season, and especially during those key tournaments, which they need to play. So yeah, those are my overall thoughts on the Shanghai Dragons. You can go ahead and
I
share yours.
Yeah, I think you're pretty much spot on. If they can integrate Fate well, then they're in for a good time, and they're definitely a close contender. Definitely to win the tournaments that are going to be happening on the Asia side, and then they can cross over to the Hawaii server and duke it out with the NA teams as well. I think Shanghai is definitely looking good once again. Um, but you know what? If there's a meta where Fate is not that good, they can always just say, Fleta, go play main tank. The guy can probably do it. He plays every hero. I mean, he's Shanghai's rascal. So
Yeah, true.
yeah, Shanghai's in a good spot. I think that pretty much sums it up. Do you have anything else to add?
No, that's pretty much it. I think we all set.
Okay. Well then, thanks for listening. Um, to our review of the Shanghai Dragons. Remember to like and subscribe if you feel like it's okay. I definitely will not hold it against you if you don't. I'll just look at you with very sad eyes, looking at that unclicked button. and that will haunt you, dear viewer, until you can't sleep at night. And on that note, goodbye.